I had no control over myself, but I did some of the most like bizarre things you can think of. So everything from like in the middle of prayers at the mosque, like I stood up and started singing and shouting, to like I went up to like every female I knew and just started hugging random people.
Hey everyone, welcome to Distinguished Figures. Today we're going to talk about something that still makes a lot of people pretty uncomfortable, menstruation. That's right, y'all. We're going to talk about periods. And joining us for this conversation is Ziyaan Virji, an ally from Tanzania, who started a nonprofit called For the Menstruator to advocate for people who menstruate in that region and multiple countries in that region. Ziyaan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. So excited to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So are you ready? Because we're actually about to get deeper than a tampon right now.
I'm very ready.
Awesome, awesome. So for the menstruator, could you give all of us like a quick rundown of what you do?
For sure, yeah. So For the Menstruator is a nonprofit I started when I was 15 after I found out that I was meant to start up a school project and I could pretty much do anything of my own. But I watched this documentary on Al Jazeera named India's Menstruation Man, and that was pretty much the first time I learned about, periods and menstruation and the fact that menstruators around the world don't have access to products. After watching this documentary, I had this conversation with my mom.
Mhm.
And during our conversation, she told me that she grew up in a single parent household when she was younger in India. And there was a point in time where she didn't have access to products. So I just watched the documentary, had this conversation with my mom, and I'm like, wow, like why haven't I known this for the first 15 years of my life? It seems like such a big issue. I go online and I research and I find out that over 500 million menstruators don't have access in Africa at the time, an average of 1 in 10 menstruators didn't have access. So
Wow.
numbers are pretty big. And I'm like, why is no one talking about this in my community? We're like, why don't I know about this? Right. So for my school project, I decided to start up this for the menstruator. And I'm sure we'll talk more about what we do and how we got to where we are today. But primarily our goal is to create a world of menstrual equity. And we do this in different forms and in different ways in different places around the world.
That's so dope, first of all.
Yeah.
Hell, I wanted to ask, I'm sure some people are wondering right now. Could you explain why you say menstruators rather than women? Because I think most people, you know.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. It's actually a very there's a lot of controversy I'd say around these like the terminologies because a lot of people feel differently about it. But the reason why we use the term menstruation is mainly because it's not all women and girls menstruate, and not all people that menstruate are women and girls. So menstruator is a more inclusive term for transgender and non-binary folks that do menstruate,
Right,
to
right.
acknowledge their experiences and also make them feel included as part of this human, bodily um cycle.
Okay. So like I was reading online and I saw that to date, For the Menstruator's work has impacted over 8 countries so far, mobilized over 160 team members and volunteers, helped at least 12,500 menstruators around the world, right? Those are
Yeah. So those numbers actually need to be updated.
okay.
Yeah. So our latest numbers are, as of today, I mean,
Uh,
17,000 menstruators. We've worked in 10 countries around the world. Maybe I can talk about how we went from a school project to those numbers.
please do. Please do. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so start this project, and for the project, I was, it's a 1 year long project. And after I find out that this is an issue, I'm like, I want to do something that's sustainable, and I want to do something that um can have a long lasting impact. And how do I do this, right? So I go online and I looked at different potential solutions. I came across disposable pads, tampons, menstrual cups, but then I also came across reusable menstrual packages. And I was like, wow, this looks really interesting. It's sustainable, good for the environment, and they also last for long. I'm like, how can I create my own? So I go online and look at all these different prototypes, and I learned how to stitch and was able to design my own prototype at the time that will last for 6 months. And based off of that, I, gave it to my friends to try it on, get feedback, whatever, finalize a product.
That's been a great
Um,
conversation.
yeah, yeah. And then eventually I was able to use to help 22 menstruators in my community in Tanzania to get access with the product for 6 months. That ended, the school project I presented about it, got a good grade. Everyone was very impressed, and I could have pretty much ended at that point like my fellow peers, but because I spent 1 year working on this, one, I realized a lot of things. So I realized that, how big this issue is, and 22 versus 500 million is nowhere close to solving the problem. Also, because I spent so much time working on this, I definitely grew a passion for this issue because I was learning a lot, and I felt like there was so much that I could do. And then lastly, I realized that the 22 menstruators that I helped, in reality, actually contributed more to the problem than solving it. Now, what this means is after the 6 months that my product would last, these menstruators would go back to the same old methods that they had. And in reality, I just created a dependency syndrome where they'll keep depending on someone else to come and help them.
Uh,
So I didn't really solve the root cause of the problem, right? So I'm like, okay, now I know this and I know the numbers and I've worked 1 year in this space. How do I move forward? So step one, obviously find a team. So I go back to school, start up my team. We were around 7 to 10 people, volunteers in my school. I used to go to school in Kenya, so in Mombasa. And
mm,
what we did was we decided to change two main things. So first, we changed our product. So we actually collaborated with a group of women with disabilities called the Tunaweza Women, and Tunaweza stands in Swahili stands for we can.
mm,
Um, but these women actually, believe that their disabilities um, aren't a barrier for them to, flourish and be successful in life. So they work full time and they have all these really cool skills. But one of the skills that they have is stitching. So with them, we came together and they had reusables before. So we kind of came together and we were like, how can we make a product that's the best product that we can potentially make? So from a product that lasts for 6 months, now a product lasts 3 years. It's 100% biodegradable, extremely cost effective, and also embarrassment free. And now our product comes with all these different additional items. So things like pairs of underwear that some of these menstruators don't even have.
mm,
Things like antiseptic soap to actually wash these reusables. Things like a waterproof bag to, when they're going to school, like how can we how they're gonna change their pads. So all these considerations that I never had in mind when I first started my project, we were able to consider when having some of this information from our potential target audience. So we changed our product, and then we change our model of approach. So now, apart from just, making these products and distributing them, what we do is we spend a lot of time to have an approach that can have a longer impact. So first we'll go in there and actually do a needs assessment, build a relationship with them, and actually understand, what's the root cause of the problem, and have a relationship with them so that it doesn't feel like, there's all this there's so much talk about, volunteerism and white savior like advocacy and things of that sort, but we really want to go in there and feel like we're on the same level as them, and we want to learn as much from them whilst also giving them information, so we have that relationship with them. After that, we'll have an educational workshop where we'll actually teach um teach both menstruators and non-menstruators, because we usually work with schools,
mm,
and teach them about reproductive health, and give them education around that. And you'd see us, giving a lectures type of session, but you'd also see us, sitting in a round circle, playing different games, sharing different stories. So we really use both formal and informal ways of doing that. After that, we then introduce our product and we'll tell them, these are all your different options, but we think reusables is a good solution. Mainly because their existing methods are cloth based, which is very close to reusables. So that's why we went with that. And we're like, here are reusables. This is how you use them. Here's how you wash them. But here's how you also make them for yourselves. So we actually teach them how to stitch. Now, the good thing about that is since we usually use locally available materials, after the 3 years that this product lasts, these menstruators can, pretty much have lifelong access because we're giving them a skill. It's that whole idea of, don't give them fish, but teach them how to fish. And that's exactly what we're doing.
So how old are you again?
Right now I'm 20, but started the organization 5 years ago. So when I was 15.
We're the same age. That's amazing. I love the hustle. Let me tell you,
Yeah.
I love the
Yeah.
hustle. I want to take a step back real quick. So, like, first of all, the first few products you made by hand, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that conversation you had with your friends about them trying it on, walk me through that. Like, because that
Honestly, the initial days, especially when I started in this space, it was tough. Like it was very difficult to have some of these conversations. Some of my friends would make fun of me, like some of my guy friends would make fun of me and they're like, yo, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you in the like why are you the pad man or the period guy? You know what I mean? Like, and I would get that at school, but a lot of my menstruating friends were actually very supportive. Some of them would offer for themselves. They're like, if you want me to try your product, like I'd love to. Like,
right?
yeah, yeah. So a lot of them, maybe it's different back at home and culture wise, like how willing people are to help, but a lot of I would say the menstruating friends were very supportive initially. And yeah, super grateful for those very few people in the
Right.
first days. I remember we used to have an event we used to do, I think on menstrual hygiene day would be we would set up a stall right in front of our commons block, and there'll just it'd be like a photo booth and with all these different like cool props, and some of them would like, I bleed, so watch, or things of that sort. And all of them would, come and take all these pictures and really work towards spreading those awareness and having those important conversations. So
Hey,
yeah.
question. You mentioned that some of them might have been different when they came from. Do you know what countries they were from at all?
Oh
Or
yeah, yeah. So this is all people, based in East Africa. So this is at my school in Kenya.
mm,
My friends in Tanzania, a lot of them uh from their racial backgrounds were mostly like African, Indian, a lot of people from those communities. But I would say it's important to acknowledge that I definitely lived, and a lot of the friends or people that I'm referring to initially were, from a more privileged background. So we went to a private school per se. And in terms of in our way of life would be completely different from, let's say, the majority of people that lived um in East Africa at the time. So but it was, I would say, when having these conversations, when we went to some of the schools that we worked in,
mm,
there are a lot of moments where, the people that we worked with were very uncomfortable having this conversation. Obviously, given the cultural stigmas and taboo associated with this topic. So there were moments where, I'd be leading a session, but then the people that working with really feel uncomfortable having a conversation with me, someone that doesn't menstruate. So I would have to step out of the room and let's say yeah, I'll literally have to step out of the room and let some of our menstruating friends lead the session.
right. Like
Um,
they were uncomfortable, or could you just tell? Like, was like a conversation or confrontation?
yeah, I think we could tell from, like, so let me give you a situation, right? Like one of the things we do is we'll go around and um share their first period stories and what was it like when they got their period, right?
Yeah.
And I'm there in the room, right? And I'm really encouraging this conversation. I'm trying to lead it. Um and usually to make them feel more comfortable, some of our team members start sharing their experiences, and then we ask them to, also share theirs. But yeah, they just feel really embarrassed, and they feel uncomfortable, and I could get those social
Yeah.
signs. So I'd have to, just step out of the room and make sure they feel comfortable and open up, and then it reaches a point where they actually love having me in the room, and they're open to that. But and seeing that change in how comfortable they are is really inspiring to see. But there've also been situations where, I've led sessions with like parents of students, and there've been like non-menstruators in the room, and some of these non-menstruators have literally stepped out like whilst I'm talking to them, or just stepped out of the room because they feel like they shouldn't be in that conversation or shouldn't be having it, right? So
Right.
yeah, that's to give you a little bit of what the social dynamic is.
Right, right. Like, yeah, that makes sense to me because, like, just reflecting on myself, I grew up in like a rural conservative Georgia. And mind you, I grew up in a household of women, right? Full of administrators who identified as women. Um, and but because it was conservative, I still had this sort of relationship with even seeing a tampon. And this is a closed tampon no one's been using. Somehow that sort of got ingrained in me that I should not be seeing that is somehow inappropriate.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I got older and I saw movements like your movement and like listened, I was like, why what's the reason? You know, like I think for some people it could be religious too. I'm not sure. You probably have more insight on that than I do, but like I know from my like upbringing, it was very religious upbringing, and it was like this idea that there should be a huge separation between men and women, right? And this is some aspect of that separation. I guess even in the
Yeah.
Bible, there's some Old Testament. I'm not sure if you're religious at all. There's some Old Testament that I'm aware of. I believe called it sort of unclean, like an unclean period. Wait, that's ironic. Sorry.
Yeah. No, yeah, no, definitely. I think like there is there's like a religious context to keep in mind, and then there's like a cultural context to keep in mind as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, a lot of religions. So I'm Muslim.
Right.
And well, not in my specific practice of Islam, but in other practices of Islam or sects of Islam.
Mhm.
Yeah, women aren't allowed to go to the mosque when they're in their period. In Hinduism, I also think they aren't allowed to go to the temple when they're in their period. Um, in some households, menstruators aren't allowed to cook or clean the house when they're in their period. So
Wait, what?
it's yeah, yeah, yeah. And this is in today's time, like this is what people practice. So
Right.
and reason, like if you look back at history,
Mhm.
um I've tried to, read a little bit and see some of what people have to say, and I've come across some texts that do say that the reason why maybe in some of these, religious texts, periods are referred to as unclean,
Mhm.
or they aren't allowed to, pray or do certain things when they're on the period, is because when these texts were written at that point in time, there were no menstrual products that can, help you from not bleeding freely. So obviously it makes, well, it's not obvious, but it makes sense for why maybe they would say that um maybe menstruators should stay at home when they're on their period and not come to the mosque when
Right.
because they could be bleeding free and it would be uncomfortable for them. So it's in their best interest. However, some of these texts aren't updated, in today's Asian time. So
Right.
and some people, obviously in terms of their relationship with their faith, they read this text word to word and not in context. So um I guess that's where some of the issue lies, and some of the stuff is just traditions that have passed on over the years, and no one has taken the time and effort to understand the
Mhm.
reason why these texts or traditions were put into place,
Right.
and don't contextualize, which I think is so important. Yeah. So yeah.
I mean, it's an issue even outside of religion too. Just thinking about like legal systems. I'm thinking about the U.S. Constitution. I'm thinking about this too. I've been in a lot of conversations lately about the U.S.
Yeah.
Constitution and like the interpretation of it. And life was just not the same centuries ago.
Exactly.
You know.
Exactly. Yeah, I think even with like in relation to, you know, politics and law and decision making and power, like
Mhm.
unfortunately in the menstrual health space, like a lot of the people that are decision makers or are sitting in these rooms making all these policies are people that don't menstruate. So
Right.
they will never ever understand what it's like to get a period, right? Or
Mhm.
how important it is. So some of the policy, that's why in a lot of places, period products are not free. At least in most places, they aren't free. That's why in a lot of places, there's an additional, tax on period products.
Mhm.
But this is because the people that are making some of these rules don't get periods, so they don't understand what it's like. We never really got to talk about um why I truly started my work. Um, I and I'm sure we can go there if we have the opportunity to. But I
Could you
I
explain?
went yeah. So I I would say so a story I didn't share. But I went through I would definitely call it a near death experience right before any of this started, right?
Right.
So um I went through an experience in which in 2017 when I was 15, right before I started the summer before I started the organization. It was my first year in boarding school in Kenya, and I unfortunately on the last day of school there was a dengue fever outbreak, and I got dengue fever.
Oh.
Um, and unfortunately, I had to travel because of the circumstance at the time. I had to travel back with it home because I couldn't stay in school.
Mm.
And I never got any treatment for dengue fever, and it took doctors 1 week for them to figure out it was dengue fever because of how because our healthcare system isn't the best. Um, I get admitted into the hospital for 1 week, and apparently doctors said if they waited any longer, my organs would start bleeding because my platelet count had
Oh.
dropped that low.
Mhm.
Um, so I was in the hospital for a week. I eventually recovered, but from the point of getting discharged up to the next 3 weeks, I went through an experience in which I don't really remember anything, but from what people said, I was acting hypersexual and hyperactive, and I had no control over myself. But I did some of the most like bizarre things you can think of. So everything from like in the middle of prayers at the mosque, like I stood up and started singing and shouting. Um, to like I went up to like every female I knew and just started hugging random people. Um, and I did a lot of things. But 3 weeks later, I wake up on my bed and I check because my habit is I check my phone like the first thing I wake up. So
Mm.
I did the same thing and I see the date, and the date says it's been 3 weeks since the last thing I remember, and last thing I remember was getting discharged from the hospital. Um, so I'm so confused and I'm like, why? My first reaction is why is my phone saying the wrong date? Like, let me try to fix my calendar. But eventually, like I went on social media and it definitely like it was I came to the realization that something's not making sense here. So I obviously call my parents, and when they come back, their first reaction was instead of like like their first reaction was they had a sense of relief because they're like, okay, Ziyaan's finally back in his senses. Um, so it took me around 2 weeks to eventually come to the understanding of what was happening because I was in shock when they were explaining to me like half these things that I did. And then I had some glimpses of when they were describing some of the stories, and however, it felt like it was a dream. So I kept thinking I'm in a dream, but I'm not. Like it was so weird, and like I kept like touching things, and I'm like, is this real or is this like I don't know. But it took me 2 weeks to eventually figure out, and everyone had a different theory. So doctors that treated me for dengue fever thought that the dengue fever affected my brain functionality. That's something that happens. We went to a psychologist, and she actually diagnosed me with bipolar disorder at the time. And she said I just went through a manic episode. Um, and then we went to like religious priests, and they say that I was possessed. We went to um, we went to a Reiki healer. She said a negative entity passed through me, and my chakra got misaligned. So everyone had a different theory, but it's really weird that I don't know what to believe up to this day. I've definitely done like a checked if I'm actually bipolar, and I think other psychologists have said like no, like they say that that's I'm not bipolar, so I've got that check. But everything else, it's like I didn't know what to believe, right? Um,
Right.
but coincidentally, and I don't know if like fate is a thing or our lives are pre-written, but coincidentally, right after going through this experience that happened during the summer. And when I go back to school, I'm required to start up this project. And as soon as I start this project, I just go through this whole journey in the last 5 years where everything just aligned, you know what I mean? And everything in my life, from my personal life, so my academic life, like everything just changed. And when I look back, I'm like, maybe I had to go through that experience to as a reminder, or as a wake-up call, or just as a push for me to reflect on, our time and our lives on this earth is not permanent, and we're only here for a short period of time. And how can I be more intentional and purposeful during my time here? um and that's when and every single day I reflect about that, because I did lose 3 weeks of my life. And I'm like, I don't know what would have happened if I never survived through that, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's sorry that's a bit deep, and I hope that's not like triggering, but
No, like
um
sharing.
but but yeah, that's before any of this started, like that's what I reflect on that. And that's why I'm so passionate about, just making an impact, and being in the menstrual space or being not. I think everyone has a calling, and everyone has a greater purpose that they should work towards. And for me, I found purpose in making an impact. And in the darkest of times, that's what's got me out of those points. Um and I always think about, maybe that's what I'm putting to this planet for, and that's the legacy I want to leave behind. And I feel like I'm working towards something greater and something more meaningful for myself, right? And all these other things are just tools for me to get there, if that makes sense. Awards, recognition, cloud, media, whatever it is, like as long as I'm able to make an impact on just one person's life, like I've worked towards my purpose, and that's what matters, I think. And that's where I come from.
I love I love it. I relate to it. And I thank you for sharing that. Um, and it's inspiring too, because a lot of us have different reasons or different things. And just the fact that you use it as fuel to make the world a better place, that's something we all can learn from. And to be an ally is something we all can learn from for sure.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think, and it's like, I think that was not like the last that was not the last. Like, I think after that, I would have gone through so many other experiences. And as I say, like whenever I'm in experiences of pain and like trauma, or I'm going through something, um it's all about, how can I use that as an opportunity and turn that pain into purpose? How can I really reflect and dive deep into myself, and think, what is when my time on this planet is over, like what do I want to be remembered for? What legacy do I want to leave behind?
Mm.
How many lives, like on my deathbed, like am I gonna think about how many Instagram followers I have, or am I really gonna think about, how many people I've been able to impact, and how many people will actually, remember me on
Exactly.
on that day? Because that's what matters, like that's
Right.
that's real legacy, in my opinion, right? And you've seen over generations the people that you actually look up to, and people that have had big impacts on this world and truly made real change. Like for them, it's never been about Instagram followers. It's never been about, like, all these things are very recent. You know what I mean? It's more about how they've had an impact on people's lives. And yeah, I always think about that.
Love it. Um, sorry, just thinking through, but I love that. And yeah, it definitely gives me renewed energy as well, just hearing someone else express in such a unique way. And thank you. Um, as we come to a close, I want to ask you one final question.
For sure.
Feel free not to respond to this one, okay? What's your favorite dessert?
Honestly, I can't answer this question. It's too
What?
controversial for me. No, my favorite dessert. Um, Honestly, I definitely feel like I have a bit of a sweet tooth. I get it from my dad. I love like lava cake.
Never
Or
had
like,
one.
Yeah, lava cake's so good because it's like a brownie or like cake, and then inside is like melting like chocolate, which is so good. And then you have like some ice cream on the side. Uh, we used
Mm,
to get that a lot at home. Like my family and I would just like on a Friday evening, like would just go and get some lava cake, and it would be such a vibe. So
okay,
yeah, favorite dessert, definitely that. Definitely missing home right now, but yeah, thank you so much for this conversation. Um, this was I'm glad we had this conversation.
for sure. Me too. Thank you for joining us, Ziyaan. And thank you to our audience for tuning in. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe. If you watch from YouTube, go ahead and leave a like. Find more information about For the Menstruator and the period poverty movement in the description. And leave a comment. There's a lot to discuss here. I'd love to hear from you. But with that said, we'll see you next time. Bye.